is an important and difficult area, the area of harmonizing standards in support of European legislation. First, to start with, I would like to reply to one of the questions I saw in the question and answer session. The difference between a mandatory standard and an harmonized standard. First of all, in the context of the new legislation on technical harmonization, is the 1025/2012 EU, which is an important legislation in the field of technical harmonization. There has been a new, slightly revised definition about what is an harmonized standard. An harmonized standard is a standard which is developed within the frame of a standardization request. Standardization request being the new name of mandate. But you will see still the standardization requests are referred with a reference M/ plus a number. So harmonized standards are generally standards supporting a standardization request. Usually, the harmonized standard will be standard containing at the end of the document an annex ZA for CEN or ZZ for CEN-ELEC and offered to the Commission. But there may be some requests within standardization request which could lead to making the document mandatory. It means that the Commission would decide to refer it within a legislation. Nevertheless, the harmonized standards remain standards which are supporting a standardization request. So today I will mainly speak about harmonized standard supporting the so-called New Approach Directive, and which at the end of the process will be listed in the official journal for information to the public and for making them officially harmonized standards. But I will explain more into the detail how we can reach this harmonized standard. So first of all, we need to remember that to develop an harmonized standard in the sense I just explained, we need to have a set of essential requirements which are contained in the directive, usually in an annex. And those essential requirements indicate what should be achieved without specifying how, because specifying how will be done by us through the standards. And of course, the new approach directive are transposed in the member states, which make it applicable to the whole Europe. In order to refer to standards in the official journal and to make them harmonized standard, there need to be an EC request, what we call a standardization request. And so those ENs are technical specifications which will meet the directive requirements. And this is explained in other words in this drawing. So you see at the top the EU legislative process where the Council, the European Commission, and the Parliament are involved. Those are public authority documents. These become mandatory when transposed by the member state in their national legislation. But those technical directives are setting some goals. And in order to achieve those goals, CEN and NHC will develop a series of technical documents, European standards, which are called in this case harmonized standards. So we will give documents to reach the goal established by the legislator. How it goes in practice is, of course, there is on the top left EU legislation, a directive, a regulation with some essential requirements. And more or less in parallel or in sequential order, as the Commission knows that they need to get standard, they will come to the European Standardization Organization in order to get a standardization request. This is usually announced well in advance, 1 year at least in advance, in what we call the Union Work Program for Standardization. It's a kind of menu of the Commission, a plan of the Commission of what they will be interested to offer to us for work. So then on the first line right come the standardization request. Standardization request is a document that will be negotiated, prepared by the Commission, but then negotiated with the European Standardization Organization, but also will get input from the member states. Member states have a big role to play, and it is also very interesting for us, for you as a national standardization bodies, to liaise with your authorities in order to explain what are the challenges which are requested by the Commission and what are the limitations. But basically, the standardization request will, and we go now on the second line of the slide on the right, it will lead to a series of a menu, which will then list a series of candidate harmonized standards that will be developed. Remember that the harmonized standard in the sense of the new approach directive remain voluntary. They are not inserted in any legislation, so they are just listed, as I will explain later, in the official journal. They are then indeed, if you continue then on the left, they are cited in the official journal, and this allows the manufacturer to oppose on their product. Usually I simplify, it's not always like this, but they are allowed to issue certificate of conformity, put some CE marking, and this allows the possibility of a single market, free circulation of the product, no need to certify again in another country. If it is certified by one certified bodies in one country, you do not need to do it again in other countries. So this is really the principle of the new approach and the free circulation and the development of a unique market for the whole European continent. There are a lot of directive and technical regulations. I just quoted a few of them. It's not an exhaustive list, but the standards are developed in order to support legislation, and they are also developed within what we call new legislative framework, which now include new approach, but the new legislative framework, we do not have time to give a lot of explanation about this in this webinar. It will cover also the conformity assessment. It will also cover the control of the circulation of the market, control of the product entering into the European territory, auditing of certified bodies, etc. So the new approach, as I said, is characterized by a standardization request, which is, let's say, a precondition for citation of the harmonized standard in the official journal. Those standards will be, of course, developed by CEN or ETSI, and at the end, they will need to get an assessment. This will be done, and we'll come back later, by a consultancy company, Ernst & Young. Of course, another element which is important and which will be checked by Ernst & Young, it is the annex ZA for CEN or ZZ for CEN. So it is obligatory to insert such an annex into the candidate harmonized standard, and please do it, think about it at the very beginning, because quite often the experts are starting on the work, on the topic, on the things they think they need to put into the standard, but they do not take the perspective of the requirements of the directive they are supposed to support. And the citation in the official journal will be EC responsibility. CEN and CEN will offer, we are offering those lists every quarter. We have a new list of standards for citation every quarter, but then the Commission have the final say, and I will come back on that later, but they will publish, at the end of the day, they will publish the new harmonized standard officially approved by the College of the Commissioner in the OJEU at the, or that you can find on the web link here. The standardization request is a quite formal document. It can be compared to a kind of contract. It's a kind of request, formal request, which will of course refer to a specific legislation and policy. It can be a directive on machine, directive on railway interoperability, etc. And this contract will mainly focus on developing a work program of requested deliverable, and also give a little bit more detail, because we need to be sure at the very beginning what exactly the Commission is expecting for us. So it is important for our technical committees to know what is the scope of the deliverable we need to develop. Of course, I know that we are in a circumstance where we have a lot of maturity for many sectors. Let's take machine. There is a long list of standards, and so if there are no new requirements in the standardization request, quite often the program to support the standardization request will be an update of an existing list of standards with well-known scope, etc. So it is very important to get at the very first stage an agreement on the work program. The Commission is really wishing to get a very detailed and very framed program of work. So it is always very important that you do not forget any standard to be offered to the Commission, because if they are not appearing in the program supporting a standardization request, Commission could simply, first of all, the Ernst & Young consultant will not be allowed to assess the standard, and moreover, the Commission could not put it in the official journal. There is then in this standardization request requirements about reporting. We will report on the progress. There is a need, of course, to establish this famous link between the requirements of the legislation and the clause of the standard is defined in Article 5. And this standardization request has always a limited date. It means that each of the standards listed in the program will have their own target dates as defined by the BT based on the proposal from the TCs. But the standardization request is nowadays limited in time. So the Commission, after 5 years, for example, they will close the standardization request. For the most experience from you, you know that in the past we had open requests. We still have a lot of open mandates, which means that there are no closing date, so we can still continue to offer new standard, new standard. But nowadays, this will disappear because the Commission will more and more come with very well-defined standardization requests. So the standardization, the harmonized standard follow exactly the same CEN procedure as described earlier by Nuno. But of course, we will have to ask for an assessment, and at least we'll ask for an assessment at inquiry and formal vote level. The process for ISO or IC, it is the same. We use the same process because the standard which we will pick from ISO will be developed under the Vienna Agreement, and we will, of course, also ask for assessment at inquiry and formal vote. I will come back on that, but it is also important to try to get an assessment on the first working draft. And very important, we need to get compliant assessment in principle for publication in the official journal. So this is the real big challenge that you and your working groups will have to develop a standard and getting a compliant assessment from the consultant. So I explained in general that this is based on this regulation, 1025/2012. There are a few articles which are of reference. This is explaining that the responsibility of developing the standard will be upon the European Standardization Organization. As you know, there are only 3 in Europe, CEN and also ETSI. And the regulation defines clearly that we need to support the legal requirements of the directive. And all those details are explained, of course, partly in the standardization request, but for operational elements, there is a vademecum, very detailed text, which describes how the Commission will work with CEN and ETSI. And there are also some clarificative elements like referred in the slide. Article 10.6 is of relevance. You can read it, but where an harmonized standard satisfies the requirement which it aims to cover and which are set out in the corresponding union harmonization legislation, the Commission shall publish a reference of such harmonized standard without delay in the official journal. Without delay is a little bit relative, as you may have experienced. This is repeated in various publications like the vademecum. I will not enter too much on this slide, but as a recap, only when listed in the OJEU, the standard candidate harmonized give presumption of conformity. So it is very important for the industry and for us to succeed to get the standard published in the official journal, because as long as they are not published in the official journal, they are a pure voluntary standard. There is no real added value. They can, of course, be used to certify product, but there is no presumption of conformity. So you need really to prove that you respect fully the requirements of the directive. The responsibility of referencing to harmonized standard is given to the European Commission, and in the past, the desk officer was more or less deciding upon this, but following a few legal cases which were put in front of the Court of Justice, European Court of Justice, the Commission has been much more strict, has been creating a new contract to get advice from an independent consultancy body, Ernst & Young, and also they scrutinize much more the report of Ernst & Young, and sometimes they can also disagree even with the assessment of the consultant. But basically, we need to try to follow as closely as possible the requirements as defined by the Commission. So the first element is, of course, to establish this table of link between the essential requirements and the clause of the standard. Here I gave an example of safety of machine directive harmonized standard. You see that you need to pick all the relevant clause of the directive, and in front of it, the precise clause which support the precise requirements of the directive. Quite often, there are disputes about the fact that a clause is not sufficiently giving elements to support the essential requirement. If it is simply copying the content or giving information, it's not really supporting. You need to get elements to really prove that you reach the requirements contained in the directive. At the end of the day, the presumption of conformity, as I said, will be achieved when the standards are listed in the official journal. In the past, it's important to note, in the past, the Commission was publishing regularly in the C series of the official journal, which is more communication series of the official journal. They were publishing integral list of updated full list of the harmonized standard supporting a specific directive. Now it changed really very deeply. The desk officer need, of course, to establish for the College of the Commissioner a full file explaining why he suggests to the Commissioner to accept the referencing in the official journal, and also full file when he is supposed to reject the standard. But the Commissioner will really vote on an act, and they will vote on an act containing a series of standards, a limited series of standards. So you may understand that it is not very easy for the industry to follow which one has been recently accepted or not. And so the Commission provides some integral list. It is not an official list, it's a summary list. You can find it on the website, which I indicate on the slide, either in PDF or even in XLS file. You have kind of summary list, but the act of the Commission are really containing a few standards which are newly added to the list or withdrawn from the current. Now, let's come to operation. As you know, you need to pass a few obstacles, and the obstacle can be the blockade. The final obstacle could be the blockade by the Commission to refer in the official journal. So you need to take all the chance that you have to try to get a compliant assessment at formal vote stage. So there is two official stages that you need absolutely to get an assessment from the consultant. It is at inquiry stage and at formal vote stage. But it's strongly recommended by us, and also by the Commission in general and by Ernst & Young, to ask for an assessment on the first draft. So the first draft that you submit after, let's say, midterm of the development process, please submit a request for an assessment. And of course, you need already, and this is what I said at the beginning, you need really to think since the beginning which requirements you support and develop this Annex ZA while you develop the clause of the standard. Now, another element of operation, which is important for you, how are we collaborating with Ernst & Young? In terms of documentation, we use our LifeLink platform. We have a dedicated HAS platform within the CEN LifeLink platform where we store, where we upload all the documents that we ask Ernst & Young to assess. And we also, this is structured like this. We structure the provision of the assessment by CEN and by CENELEC. So we have a series of folders where we have the standards to be assessed. And there also, under assessment result, Ernst & Young will upload in a specific area, assessment result, will upload the assessment when finalized by the consultant. We have also, as shown in the bottom of the slide, a kind of document repository where we make available to the consultant through Ernst & Young all the standards, for example, which are normative reference of the standard, because you know that the consultant will also examine the normative reference contained in the Harmonized standard. So this is the platform where we exchange information from us to Ernst & Young and from Ernst & Young to us. And it is why it is important for you to be aware that if you wish to know what is and when the assessment result is obtained, you need to set up your account as a TC secretary, for example, in order to get an alert when the assessment result on a specific TC is uploaded on the live link. And so you need, as explained on the slide, you need to select the folder you are interested, set a notification, and it is well, you need to choose if you do it midday, etc. But you need to flag in the 5 first line of the area to which you wish to get a notification. No, as explained, and it is on the slide, it is in yellow. Sorry about the red lines under the text. It is an extract from an Ernst & Young document, and it was presented like this. So I cannot remove the underline in red. But this is a good picture of what we are able to do in terms of interacting with Ernst & Young. In yellow, you can discover, as I mentioned before, the possibility to get assessment at drafting stage or CD stage. If you have a CD from ISO, you can ask also an assessment at this stage. But of course, at the moment of the inquiry and at the moment of the formal. It is important to remind that you have only 3 chains. And if you miss those 3 chains, then you get into problem. And I will explain at the end of my presentation how to tackle problem of a non-compliant assessment when obtained at formal vote stage. But of course, you need, after you get the assessment from the consultant, you need to interact. You need to interact with the consultant to understand what he is writing, because sometimes you do not understand what he wants, or you think it's impossible to achieve, or whatever. And so in order to do this, there is 2 important steps, which is the possibility to exchange with the consultant and to clarify and discuss the comment with them when you have received an assessment. It is in light gray on this slide. I will explain that there are 2 types of possibility. If the meeting is 4 hours, you need to get a formal request. If it is less than 4 hours, you do not need to lodge a formal request. There is also another important, not so often used, but it may be used as well. It is foreseen possibility, even before you submit the standard to the consultant, to get an exchange with a consultant in order to clarify a topic of the directive. Sometimes the consultant will not be able to give you all the reply, but at least the consultant, as you know, they work for Ernst & Young, which is the management body of the consultancy team. But at the end of the day, they work for the desk officer responsible of the directive. And so they need to report to them. And if there is question that they are not able to reply, they need to clarify their question with them. And so if you have already a question before first draft, you can ask for this. So here I summarize what I just said before. If you need to request a formal meeting with a HRS consultant, you need to fill in a form on the website, which is on the first bullet. If there is, in exceptional case, a need to get conseil recommendation prior submitting a first document, there is also a possibility, and you need to contact Ernst & Young and specify exactly your question. And this can be also facilitated by CCMC. I have sometimes this type of interaction with the Commission in order to facilitate an exchange at early stage. This is summarizing what you are allowed to do and in which circumstance, what you are not obliged to do. You are not obliged to do a request if you are simply asking for a meeting less than 4 hours. It is a bit administrative, but you need to follow exactly the process as defined by Ernst & Young. So the key principle, of course, is to request assessment as often as possible. So please request assessment at drafting stage. So you get an additional possibility to clarify and discuss with the consultant. When getting assessment, use the opportunity to exchange with consultant after the drafting stage assessment and after the inquiry stage assessment by requesting a meeting, a telco, 1 hour, 2 hours at least. But of course, be prepared. First, examine all the comments, discuss those into your technical group, working group, shortlist the comments where you have problem and try already to reply to the easy comments, and then study the comments, prepare your questions, because it's much better to raise silly questions rather than to say, oh, it is a stupid document, I do not take about this. No, if there is a comment, please try to understand why this comment is issued and raise questions. This is really the possibility through the telco to get an exchange and to better understand and to get empathy and to get convergence with the consultant. It's much better that you create this dialogue with the consultant. Even you may perceive that he is sometimes a bit stubborn and a bit lacking flexibility. Try to understand what he is wishing to get from you in the draft standard. But be careful also that the consultants are not allowed from their contractual perspective with Ernst & Young to do something which are listed in the 5 bullets on the slide. They are not allowed to get and to start studying new draft. They can only study 3 types of draft: initial document, inquiry, and formal. Second bullet, they cannot, of course, never go to the consultant and ask, could you write me a sentence to fill in this part of the standard? No, they cannot do this. And they can even not provide solutions to resolve the issue that they have pointed out. They need to be kept neutral. They can point out the issues they are facing with, and then they need to let you discuss and build a consensus building, because indeed in the past, sometimes the industry were criticizing the consultant because they were too involved in the development of standard and trying to push for some solution which were not consensus-based. So that's why Ernst & Young has given instruction to their consultant to step out and to not be so much involved in the support of the TC. Of course, they need to provide, as I said before, guidance on the legislation, but if they are in doubt, they cannot decide themselves on an interpretation. If they are in doubt, they need to go back to the Commission. This is very important. So always, if you have some doubt about a guidance that the consultant is giving you, ask them, are you sure about this? Could you get a confirmation from the Commission? And this they need to do. They need to be in connection with their boss as well. And also they cannot at the very final stage, they cannot get a final verification on a new draft. And I will explain this, what we can do it in practice to resolve non-compliant assessment. And I'm coming maybe on the most delicate but most important slides. In practice, yes, you will try to resolve as many comments as possible at assessment, at the indicative assessment stage. You will have another change and a new set of comments, though, at inquiry stage. You will try again to resolve. And certainly at this moment, it is very, very important to really be sure that after inquiry, each of the comments the consultant has made has really be taken on board by you carefully, and that the consultant is accepting your solution. Please check with them, following more or less the same principle that are laid out on this slide. Check with them that they agree of the solution that you have provided to address their comments. And if you do this, normally, if you get the same consultant, because it's not always the case, you should get a compliant assessment because you have exhaustively addressed after inquiry all the comments. Unfortunately, there are still too many cases where we get negative assessment at formal vote stage. And as you know, there is no last chance, in fact. When we get a negative assessment at formal vote stage, what we need still to do is to try to address those. Sometimes it is relatively easy. There are maybe 10 or 15 comments. And so what you will do as usual, you will fill in the famous table of comments with their comments and try to see how you could still correct the standard in order to address this very last comment. So you fill in the suggestion in order to address the comment of the consultant, and of course, in parallel, you can make a track change document explaining what will be the result of this latest change. You need to be sure that you all agree about that. And then what you have to do is to organize, again, a telco with a consultant. Should be short, because normally there should not be so many comments. And then you need to find a kind of basic agreement that what you are proposing as corrective action is okay for the consultant. Maybe you will have 1 or 2 hours telco, and at the end of the day, you will send the conclusion to the consultant and just simply ask him a question like, we have discussed those comments. Is it reflecting the results, the conclusion of our exchange? And normally the consultant will say, yes, it is reflecting the conclusion of our exchange. So it means basically that you have addressed the comments which were non-compliant at formal vote stage. And this allows you to go later to your project manager, and the project manager can go to the commission and say, aha, okay, yes, it's true. We had a non-compliant assessment at formal vote stage, but we resolve it. We resolve it before launching the formal vote. And this is the most, of course, the most favorable situation, because then the process can continue. But sometimes you will not succeed to do it with only one telco. You will need to have 1, 2, and it happens that you need 2 or 3, even 4 telco. And it's sometimes very difficult to get a final feedback from the consultant, which will, at the end, will say, okay, basically it's okay. And so we can go to formal vote, you can publish, and we can offer to the commission. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of cases where we discuss, and we still keep a negative feedback. And in this case, we have to agree that we will not resolve the negative assessment and negative non-compliant assessment at format vote stage. And the only solution is to either stop the document and start again a new work item and do a kind of revision, either publish the document as it is, but without being able to offer it to the Commission because we have a negative assessment non-resolved. And if we do this, we need, of course, to issue at least an amendment in order to correct the topics which were not addressed at the moment of the formal vote. And when this amendment is published, together with the mother standard, normally, if we get a compliance assessment on the amendment, we could then offer the master version with the amendment. I know that in CEN, of course, we are providing normally a consolidated document. I think it's time for questions.
Yes, thank you, Trey. I would like to propose that we skip the Q&A for this part because we're running out of time a bit because we intended to end this presentation at 12 o'clock. So I would like to suggest that we go on with the 10 slides that remain. In any case, as promised, the questions will be part of the Q&A report that we will share later on.
But I think that I will stop sharing and let Nuno do his bit. In the meantime, I can study as well the questions.
Yes. Of course, you're free to answer the questions also in a written way so that people have their answer already.
So I will fly through my slides because I know that we are running out of time. Can you see already my screen, Els? Can you confirm?
Yes, I do.
All right. So now we move to the BOSS, to the Business Operations Support System, which provides, as I said at the introduction of this presentation, practical information for you that are actively contributing to the development of standards and other deliverables in CED. And also it describes processes and gives access to instructions and guidance for your day-to-day work. So basically, it's a quite stable source of information regarding the standardization rules and procedures. It is very important that CEN TC secretaries, chairs, and of course all the experts consult this page on regular basis in case you have any doubts on a standardization procedure or any rule, together with, of course, the internal regulations part 2 and 3 that you can find if you go to reference material. You can see here on the slide on the right side the reference material. You can find there the rules. You can also find the formatted decisions and forms and templates that then can help you with your work. So on this slide on the left side, we have the forms and templates and can range from the typical CEN simple template for drafting standards to the transmission notice, to the table of comments. You can download all these useful documents. Below in the templates you have as well, if you're developing harmonized standards, you have as well the templates for the different annex ZAs for the different directives or regulations. Normally for the weighted votes, this is automatically calculated via the CIB tool. However, there are some situations where you may have to take a decision. So the TC may have to take a decision and you may have to calculate manually the weighted votes. I can give you a precise example. So imagine the TC creates a new work item for the development of a standard. And then during the development of the standard, there is no agreement to develop this anymore as a standard, and there is a need to take a decision to work on a TS. So this would be a TC decision by weighted vote, and then you would have to use the voting calculator to check if the weighted vote is positive. On BOSS, you can also find a section. If you go to reference material and formatted decisions, you can see there very useful formatted decisions. What happens very often is that the TC launches a CIB for taking a decision, for example, for confirming a standard. And then on the CEN BOSS, you can find the formatted decision. You just need to fill the parts that are in gray. And then it is important that you submit to us, to data service, in order to register these decisions in our database. This point was also mentioned before that every time we have a CEN or CEN and CENELEC BT meetings, we always prepare a technical board newsletter that summarizes all the BT decisions that were taken, and we circulate by mail this BT newsletter to our TC officers, so the TC secretaries and chairs, and we also make available this BT newsletter on the website. So this is the link that you can consult all the BT newsletters in the last years. And now some very general useful information just to conclude the presentation. You have our CEN website. We have as well a dedicated area with training documentation. We have as well the on-the-spot newsletter where we tackle, for example, where we promote some standards or where we talk about some events that are important. Here you have as well the links to our social media. So I would say that Els is in a better position, of course, to talk about this, but I think that we are quite active in Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find as well the CEN, CENELEC and CEN guides that can be quite useful for your work as well. Here you have a list of the CEN technical committees, and in these technical committees you can access as well the work program and the standards that are published by the different TCs. You have a list of the CEN members, and also here you have a list of the 1010 webinars that we organize, and also the webinars for standard drafters. And here is just a reminder of of your contact points. So in case you take decisions in a meeting or by correspondence that need to be inserted in our database, you can send these decisions